In the brutal calculus of professional boxing, where warriors are forged in fire and legends carved out of pain, there are certain moments that test the mythology of even the most feared fighters. For Naoya Inoue, the man widely known as the Monster, those moments didn't come often, but when they did, they revealed something far more intriguing than raw dominance. They revealed vulnerability, adaptation, and survival. While many fans recall his ruthless knockouts and seamless demolitions of champions, few remember the early challenges that shaped his ascent. Before he became the undisputed king of the lighter weight classes, before his name struck fear across continents, Inoue went through wars that chipped away at the illusion of invincibility. 3 particular fights stand out: grueling, punishing, and revealing contests that laid bare both his fragility and his greatness. In 2015, Inoue was coming off a sensational knockout victory over Omar Narvaez. It was a statement win that elevated his profile and cemented him as a generational talent. But beneath the glamour of that performance lay a troubling cost: a serious injury to his right hand. For a fighter whose entire style depends on timing, speed, and punch placement, such an injury was a major setback. It forced him out of the ring for nearly a year, a period of uncertainty that could have derailed a less resilient fighter. By the time he returned, expectations were sky-high, but the wear and tear of combat had already left its mark. His comeback bout was against David Carmona, a Mexican fighter who, on paper, seemed overmatched. With 20 wins and only 9 knockouts, Carmona wasn't seen as a power threat. But those who understood the grit of Mexican boxing heritage knew he would bring more than just a record to the ring. He brought heart, durability, and an unshakable desire to challenge greatness. For Carmona, this wasn't just another title shot, it was a career-defining opportunity. He had already failed once in a world title bid, and he was desperate not to let a second chance slip through his fingers. The fight, which took place on May 8, 2016, quickly evolved into a far more dangerous test than Inoue had likely anticipated. From the opening bell, Carmona fought with an urgency that bordered on reckless. He didn't enter the ring to survive, he came to conquer. The early rounds saw both men trading power shots, but something was off with Inoue. Perhaps it was the ring rust or the lingering hesitation from the hand injury, but he looked vulnerable. Carmona, sensing this, pushed harder, treating Inoue less like a monster and more like a man, and the middle rounds, Inoue began to find his rhythm. His left hook, in particular, started landing with punishing regularity. However, the drama escalated when, once again, his right hand gave out. The same hand that had sidelined him for nearly a year was now compromised mid-fight. He was forced to continue with one hand, a near-impossible task against a world-class opponent throwing everything he had. Fighting essentially one-handed, Inoue had to adapt in real time. He shifted his stance, committed more to body shots, and relied heavily on timing and precision with his lead hand. Remarkably, he still controlled most of the bout. His technique and footwork neutralized Carmona's aggression, and his left hand became both sword and shield. In the final round, Inoue even managed to land a flush right hand, despite the injury, as a punctuation mark on a brave, painful performance. Although he won by a wide margin on the scorecards, it was clear this wasn't the typical Naoya Inoue fight. He had absorbed punishment, fought through physical limitation, and, for the first time, looked beatable. Carmona, despite losing, walked away with his stock elevated. He had taken 4 rounds off one of the most dominant fighters of the generation, more than any of Inoue's previous opponents had managed. For Inoue, it was a reminder that even monsters can be wounded and that greatness sometimes lies in how one manages adversity rather than how one dominates. Yet this wasn't the first time Inoue had been pushed to the edge. To understand the foundation of his durability, one has to go back to a much earlier chapter, his 4th professional fight in 2013 against fellow Japanese fighter Ryoichi Taguchi. At the time, Inoue was just 20 years old, an untested prodigy who had already started turning heads with his raw talent and poise. Taguchi, on the other hand, was the reigning Japanese light flyweight champion. He was also a seasoned warrior, and unlike many young fighters who pad their records with soft touches, Inoue dove straight into deep waters. Their first encounter had been in the amateurs, but this time it was professional. It was for a national title. And unlike the polished destroyer Inoue would become, what fans saw in that ring was a young lion still learning the price of war. From the first round, the tone was set. Taguchi wasn't there to mentor or test the young fighter. He was there to beat him. He landed stiff jabs, sharp counters, and body shots that clearly disrupted Inoue's flow. The younger man tried to keep his distance and utilize his natural speed, but Taguchi's experience and toughness forced a different kind of fight. This was no surgical dissection. This was a brawl. As the rounds progressed, Inoue had to fight not only with skill but with grit. He got hit clean and hard. There were moments when his defense broke down and Taguchi's right hands landed with full authority. But each time, Inoue adjusted. He responded with sharper combinations and more bodywork and gradually began to take control. But it was never easy. Taguchi refused to wilt, even as the younger fighter's volume increased. The rounds were closely contested, and Inoue's corner, led by his father and lifelong trainer, had to give constant instruction to guide their son through unfamiliar territory. By the later rounds, Inoue had finally started to break through. His timing was improving, his counters were landing, and he was slipping shots with more confidence. But Taguchi, who would later become a world champion in his own right, gave everything he had. It wasn't until the final bell rang that the momentum clearly rested in Inoue's favor. The judges gave Inoue a unanimous decision victory, and rightfully so. But Taguchi had done something rare. He'd taken Inoue the full 10 rounds and walked away on his feet. Not only that, he became the only fighter in Inoue's professional career up to that point who had neither been knocked down nor knocked out. The performance was a revelation. Yes, Inoue was a prodigy, but he was also human. His toughness was tested, his composure challenged, and his limits expanded. If Carmona and Taguchi were early reminders of Inoue's humanity, Kohei Kono would serve as the ultimate test of his ability to overcome attrition and brutality. Kono wasn't just another challenger. He was a veteran, a two-time world champion, and a man whose iron chin had become legendary in Japanese boxing circles. By the time he faced Inoue on New Year's Eve in 2016, Kono was no longer in his prime, but he was far from finished. His experience, stamina, and sheer stubbornness made him the kind of fighter who could stretch anyone to their breaking point. From the outset, Inoue's game plan was clear: pressure Kono early, test his reflexes, and wear him down with body shots. But Kono had fought too many wars to be intimidated by the bright lights or the hype surrounding Inoue's rise. He marched forward relentlessly, eating jabs and absorbing right hands, while continuing to throw his own leather in return. Inoue landed several clean shots in the early rounds, but Kono refused to budge. He walked through everything, daring the younger man to do more. By the third round, the tempo escalated. Inoue began landing with combinations that would have folded lesser men, but Kono kept punching. It was now a battle of attrition. Inoue's movement and footwork were put to the test as Kono tried to drag him into a trench war. At one point, it looked like Kono might even shift the momentum in his favor, landing heavy right hands that clearly stunned Inoue. It was a moment of real danger. The monster, for all his precision and power, had to retreat, reset, and recover. But something changed in the 6th round. Whether it was fatigue catching up with Kono or Inoue sensing a crack in the armor, the tide turned dramatically. Inoue landed a left hook that buckled Kono's legs, followed by a right hand that sent him crashing to the canvas. Kono managed to get up, but he was never the same. Inoue smelled blood and, with surgical precision, began unloading everything in his arsenal. A final left hook-right hand combination ended the fight, with Kono sprawled against the ropes, defeated not by one punch, but by the accumulation of hundreds. That victory marked the fourth defense of Inoue's WBO Super Flyweight title and his 12th professional win. It was also one of the most brutal performances of his career. Kono was a proud warrior, and that fight effectively signaled the end of his elite days. He would go on to suffer more losses and eventually retire. For Inoue, it was another mountain climbed, another tough, seasoned veteran conquered not just with talent, but with resilience. Through Carmona, Taguchi, and Kono, fans witnessed three distinct but essential chapters in Inoue's rise. These were not effortless victories or routine demolitions. These were trials, physical, emotional, and psychological. Each opponent brought something different to the table. Carmona with his grit and opportunism, Taguchi with his pride and resistance, and Kono with his toughness and experience. They exposed gaps, however small, in Inoue's armor. They forced him to evolve. But most importantly, they showed that beneath the highlight reel knockouts and flawless technique lies a fighter with the heart of a warrior. A man willing to go to dark places to win. A champion who knows what it feels like to be hurt, cornered, and out of rhythm, and yet finds a way to endure. For all the moments when Naoya Inoue looked invincible, it's these early wars that proved he was more than just a monster. He was a survivor, a craftsman, a fighter, and in that, his legend only deepened.